Welcome back to Science versus Conspiracy over Coffee, the show that explores what can't easily be categorized or explained away. I'm your host on this journey into the unknown. My name is Bob, otherwise known as Conspiracy. Brew some coffee, pull up a chair, and open your mind. Today on Science versus Conspiracy, we are joined by Wanako Oberhuber. Wanako has experience with various energy working techniques and has dabbled in mysticism and is a firm believer in miracles and the power of creativity. He's also an artist and host of the podcast, The Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy. Welcome to the show, Wanako. You have an interesting portfolio of topics that you're interested in talking about. But first off, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, well, I've lived in a few countries over the years. As a child, I was in America, and I lived in Italy, and then now I'm living in Austria. So I've had a lot of different cultures to master, so to speak, over the years. And I grew up in a family where there's a lot of art, and art history were topics. I loved doing creative things, and as a child, I loved make-believe and working with creative ideas and making up my own things. So, and it developed over the years, the various topics that I got interested in. Like I studied social and cultural anthropology. I've learned a lot of energy work techniques and styles. And I went into that using it, getting to know what it does and what it doesn't and how it works for me. And then I got the scientific background, like I said, with anthropology. And now I've also dedicated myself to education. So I'm in early childhood education at this moment. So that's a very important topic to me as well. And it's dear to my heart, how we work with kids and how we support them and how we support each other in that journey. So those are all things that are very important to me. And one of the other topics that has become important is a book called A Course in Miracles.
So your time as an artist, can you tell me about the type of work that you do?
Yeah, as an artist, I did all kinds of things. One of the things was writing, and one of the things that tipped me off. I mean, when I was a child, I was already interested in telling stories because I was introduced to storytellers and the way they presented their stories on stage. And then we had circles where we joined together to tell stories as well, which was an interesting experience where you would pass along a stone or a stick or something, and the next person would continue the story. And you'd get these amazing stories, with all kinds of points of views put together into a story frame.
Right.
So that got very interesting. And I also loved movement and drawing and painting, mainly drawing though. And I later on actually had exhibits and I would also present my written work as well. And I also, to a certain degree, also developed songs. So I've sung songs.
Okay,
and
cool.
in my work as an early childhood educator, creativity is also important. So
yeah, so that'd be a good connection between the two. With this connection with art and the creativity and the storytelling, how does that tie into like the miracles and the make-believe, and how has that influenced you throughout your life?
Yeah, well, the thing is, a lot of things that we experience in life are pushed aside as fantasy or creativity or whatever, or inventiveness. And you can discover that there's another dimension to it when you get into the mystical side of life. And then you discover that there's also a dimension of it that is a truth, in the sense of the experience being true to you or meaningful. Not that it has any necessarily physical reality to it, but it has a meaning to it, and that transforms how you experience things. And so that ties into the idea of mindset, or the way you see things changes your life. And so I developed from the idea of a lot is a fantasy to the idea that there's more to it. There's a lot more to it, and I want to honor that. And then I discovered that there's other people who also see that. And then I got to know, books about psychology, and as well about shamanism and other topics. And they showed that there's a lot to look at about this, right? The one speaks about what you think determines how you experience things. The others say you can change your mind about everything by going deeper and looking at things that are going on within you. And of course, also changing your mind about the world. As A Course in Miracles says, you can't change the world, but you can change your mind about it. So that also ties into it. And then another part is the anthropology, where I got to know religion and consciousness studies, where you look at it in another way, where you say, okay, people say they experience this. You can observe certain things happening, and you just document that and then compare things, and you are able to show what's going on for people, but you're not the one deciding whether it's true or false. So you don't know whether that deity actually exists or not. That's not your problem. So anthropology found a solution to describe it like as if it were a theater piece. You'd use the language of theater. So in order to not decide whether it's true or not, you don't have to, you describe it, but you describe it in those terms. And that helps a lot.
Right. So is it cultural? Do different cultures believe different things? Do they or have different ways of approaching this?
Yeah, every culture has a different way of seeing things. And there's of course the debate whether you can compare cultures or not. Right? The one idea is that you have to understand a culture from within its own framework. You can't compare.
Right.
And the other would be the idea, okay, we have commonality in many ways, and we can compare and find differences and commonalities and thereby analyze it all. So there's a very big debate on that. And you can see it in the language debate as well. Because, one side says language determines what you think. And the other says, yeah, we can use language to communicate, right? So we have to be able to translate as well.
Yeah, because would bring up a whole lot of issues if the communication isn't there and that understanding isn't there. Is there a relationship between the creativity and the cultural diversity?
I think that creativity is born from the willingness to engage with what is going on, and to be willing to let these things combine in ways that you would only come up because of what's going on within you, your willingness to put it together in a way that fits to your experience, or allow your experience to develop because of the things that you're experiencing, and transform your experience. So it's I think creativity is a very complex topic, and I've read books about it, and they all have different views, and they also speak about flow states, which you then find, if you want to compare things and allow yourself to compare, you can say flow states. And there's trance states in the mystical traditions, in the various spiritual traditions, and they come. And then one psychology also has, some psychologists have discovered that you can say, okay, you see the world differently depending on which state of mind you're in.
Right.
Which makes a huge difference. So if you're in a trance state, you're going to have a different experience of what's going on. And if you're in a other state of mind, and you will come to different conclusions. And so this one psychologist said, well, if you're in a different mind state, you would need a different type of science to work there.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So I thought that was really amazing, to say, okay, I need a different science for every type of state of mind that I'm in, because it won't work to put it all with one type of science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I never really thought of it that way, because you hear the mystic stories of the Native Americans and how they go on these vision quests, and then other states with using like drugs like ketamine to work out social anxiety and depression, feelings of the anxiety and depression. So those would need, I guess, a couple like different ways of dealing with it, and different forms of science, and different approaches to those different states that you get put into.
Yeah, and you also have different ways of getting into these altered states. Mm-hmm. There's different methodology to do that. And we are, you can do it with various methods, and so that also makes a difference. And you can imagine with the youth, there was this whole movement of transcendental psychology, where at first they used LSD or something like that to get into those states, and then they developed this way of breathing to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that the transcendental meditation.
So transcendental psychology, and so there's a whole history to these things, and so yes, and I think it's very interesting. It also has that same debate I was speaking about with cultures, comparing or not, right? Mm-hmm. Can you compare states of mind or not, right?
Right, because if you're having different shared experiences. And that kind of brings up how do you define reality? What is real? What's real? What's not real? Are these higher levels of these different states? Are they and what you're seeing and experiencing, is that physical? Is that real? Where do you go from there, and how do you define that?
Yeah, that's a really big issue. What is real and what is not? And if you say like that it depends on your state of mind, what is real to you and what is not, you can imagine that every state of mind brings a different experience and a different answer to that question.
And then I guess that ties nicely into this next part about free will, because I really we've done a few episodes on free will, and if it's if we actually do have free will, or if everything is determined. So what's your take on that? in the context of creativity and mysticism?
Yeah, well, I might like to go about it by saying what A Course in Miracles has to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then might go further from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a fascinating way of seeing it. And A Course in Miracles speaks about the one will. There's one will that actually works in which you're happy, and that is a free will. And that is God's will in the terms of A Course in Miracles. Mm-hmm. That's your actual will, the will that actually fulfills everything for you, that makes up who you are. And then there's the one that we made up, which is the ego will, as the Course in Miracles would say. The ego has all these ideas what you have to do in order to be happy and this and that. While the free will, the God's will, is actually where you really are aligned and everything. You are happy because that's who you are. So I think that's a very big question. Is free will the right to decide things, or is free will when you are free through the way you are applying will? Because I think that's a big thing. The most talks about free will is what, like you were saying, are you determining what happens or not? But that's not, in A Course in Miracles, it's not about whether you determine what happens, but whether you are free.
Right. Yeah. So free will, or is it free choice? Do you have that choice?
So the choice is between whether you are choosing something that makes you unhappy or separate from others or from your experience, or whether it joins you with who you are. And that would be the only choice in A Course in Miracles, is between separation thinking and the thinking that actually acknowledges the oneness of our nature.
So in terms of miracles, is that something that we have to be in a certain state of mind to experience and witness? Does it happen spontaneously? Can you just explain that a little bit more? The idea of miracles.
Well, in A Course in Miracles, miracles are determined by the cause, not by what happens. So it's a miracle when it's a thought of love. A thought of love is already a miracle.
Okay.
So it's not about these fantastic things that people experience in what they call miracles, but it's about the choice you've made.
Right. So it's not you're surviving a car crash and it was a miracle that you survived it. That's not the type of thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, that can be what happens, but it's the choosing love that determines that it's the miracle. That's the miracle. What follows, that can be the cause of something that happens that is according to what we usually experience a miracle, right? Because it's so different, so wonderful, and so joyful. But the cause needs to be love. Otherwise, it's not really what A Course in Miracles calls a miracle.
Okay, so the mindset that you have to be in, the mindset that you have to be in, you have to be in a not filled with love, but you have to be open, and I guess what you're saying is you have to be open and willing to accept people and love. And not be full of hate, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. To be more open to it.
It's determined by a choice. And it doesn't have to last long or anything. It can be a moment, right? A choice that you made in the moment. It doesn't have to be anything long-winded. Or it might be, like you said, you just open up to that, right? You're open, and then you are willing to experience it, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
So the secrets of with the power of turning inward and connecting to your inner self, like that's all part of making the miracles happen, I guess. And is that like the self-reflection? Like, do you need to be? It doesn't have anything to do with like being an introvert or extrovert, but if you have that time to kind of sit back and reflect, if you're more reflective, is it? Does that help you to create that, I guess, that sense of peace, or is it very individualized?
Yeah, according to A Course in Miracles, we have the way we go about, the way we learn these things is very individualized. But the way what you need to learn is not.
Okay.
Right? So you choose when you learn it, and how you learn it is very individualized because of the way things work in what A Course in Miracles calls the dream, right? Because what we're experiencing here in terms of A Course in Miracles is a dream. And so our experience in the dream, because of the will to wake up, to remember who we are, like you were saying, that is what our goal is, right? Is to wake up. But we can't do it alone. We have to allow it. We have to let the things be. Yeah, it's like actually is a way of surrendering to who you truly are, rather than to who you think you are. Right? Because if I buy into who I think I am, I'm always buying into things that separate me from others or make me special or something. And A Course in Miracles says, no, we don't need specialness. We may be different because of the function we have within the dream experience, right? But not because we're special.
Have you experienced any miracles or anything that's been kind of life-changing that put you on a certain path, on this path?
Well, I guess there's many things that are miracles, because every time that I was able to allow myself to experience love or well-being or whatever, and say, okay, all is fine, all is okay the way it is, right? That is a miracle in itself, because it's so common to think that there's a problem everywhere. So I think you were trying to say that you wanted to hear one of the more tangible experiences that one can describe.
Yeah.
As different from other experiences that changed things. And yes, there are experiences that I've had, but they're so individualized, and yet they're also something that probably many other people have experienced. And one of the things that I've experienced is that it often comes when you are in a point in your life where you are wondering whether this is what all that there is, whether it's enough, right? Because you might be like, oh my, is this what it is all about? And I remember asking the questions, who am I, right? What am I here for? Why am I? These general topics that I think is very general to everyone. And then you experience all these things that are challenging, and then you're so challenged that you're like, I need help here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do with this. And then things would come up often, as a response to that urge, that need to find a way that works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hear that so often that if you're looking and searching and actively searching it out and you can't find it, and then you stop and you kind of give up, and then all of a sudden it just floods you with what the answer that you were seeking. So it's almost like you have to just relax and know that put it out in the universe, but know that it's going to happen at some point, and don't force it, I guess.
I think you can't force it, but it's not always, the relaxation doesn't necessarily come when you expect it.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be a lot of pressure. You might be going, hey, I need an answer right now. And then sometimes the answer comes because for some reason you let it happen. Mm-hmm. I cannot determine why or how. But according to the way I understand it, you make a decision. I really want to know. I'm sincere about this, right? I really want to get something.
Mm-hmm.
And then then something does happen, right? Like, or in my case, I remember where I was saying, there's more to this. What these things that I'm imagining, they're not just imaginings. They're not just make-believe. They're not just fantasy. There's more to it. Mm-hmm. And then I read a book about shamanism where these various things that people experience within them are taken seriously. And it was written by psychologists, the book that I read, right? But I mean, mm-hmm. It's taken seriously, and actually there are really, really positive results from it. And then suddenly I felt validated in my understanding, and then things have shifted, and where I could suddenly say, okay, maybe I'm not the victim of the world that I see here. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe not everything is against me, right?
Right.
Maybe I'm not alone here, right? With my thoughts or my experience.
Yeah. What are some of those lessons, I guess, that psychologists are now learning from some of the shamans and that?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the beautiful things about it is that through methods from shamanism, people were able to heal trauma that was very long lasting or very persistent. Mm-hmm. They were able to look at things, and I mean, before the psychologists were researching dreams as well, but it was different. But yes, many things resolve in what we think are dreams. Right? You can resolve things, in what we have thought as of dreams. Mm-hmm. But there's more to it, because why would it solve something if it were just a working up of issues that you have in your daily life? I can't imagine that that's all that there is to it. Mm-hmm. Right? There's more, because how can you resolve issues like, being afraid of heights or whatever there might be in your life, and then you start flying in your dreams and seeing things from up above, and then these fears start to resolve themselves, and you feel better and you can deal with it in a different way. And I think there's more to it, because the flying implies also freedom. So you're letting go of fear implies also a much greater freedom. We were speaking of the powerful will that frees you, right? A will that is actually freeing. That's what comes up there. A will that is free because you feel free. Mm-hmm. And all these constraints that you think you have may not be there the way you think they are. And a lot of it is determined by the way you see it.
Right. So you get the connection between dreams and creativity. I know from myself, my own experience, that a lot of my early, I guess, experiments with painting and drawing and stuff like that, the ideas came from dreams. And not necessarily the experiences that I've had, but the dreams that whatever it is, that processing or working out, it there's some, there's something there that's not just a bunch of neurons firing.
Yeah, there's something more there, and that's the I think that's part of what mysticism is. It explores that which is more to the experience. And that's the same as in your, so to speak, bodily waking state. You also often have this feeling there's more to it than what I'm seeing here. I think that's what science is exploring as well. And spirituality is exploring it in many different ways, and every culture has a different way of exploring that and speaking about it. And I think that's the beauty of it, that we're willing to engage with the unexplainable at the moment. And the way we do it comes in many forms.
What's your thought on the book and the movie, The Secret, and that kind of philosophy of making things happen?
Yeah, I actually like the idea that the goal could be peace of mind rather than the results in the dream, as the Course in Miracles calls it, right? And A Secret has that in it, but it's also focused on specific results. And what I think it's true that what is most important is that we are truly happy, and we want to be happy. And I think that's what Course in Miracles says. That's what is common to pretty much everyone, is that we want to be perfectly happy. And the approach to that is very, very diverse.
And even what you think will make you happy often isn't the actual thing that's going to make you happy.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to change one's mind about things, to allow that to happen.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of why we started this podcast too, is just to open your mind to the possibilities of different things, that things aren't necessarily as they seem, and it's not just about the conspiracy part of it, or like the paranormal. Like, it's just being open to new ideas, because things. Ideas change over time. Science knowledge expands. We learn more things about the mind, the body. So what was once deemed magic or something outerworldly, we learn more about it, and we get a greater understanding of the world around us, and whether that's experiencing a deep meditative state through transcendental meditation, or through your dreams, and then bringing that creativity aspect and the miracles part of it into it. I think it's really important to to have that open mind and continue to ask questions. And have and learn from your own experiences and from those around you.
Yes, that's and of course the miracle states, in other words, it says we're walking each other home. And open-mindedness is one of the very fundamental as well, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So trust is where it starts, and open-mindedness is the result.
Right.
And there's a whole lot of steps in between
Yeah.
and qualities that develop through the development of trust. That's the first step.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to trust that there is a way, right? There is another way if you're not happy with the way it is now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to trust there is another way. That's the first step. And that's what triggered A Course in Miracles as well,
mm-hmm.
for the authors of it.
Right. Yeah. And to borrow a line from Star Trek, I don't know if you're a fan or anything, but when Kirk says he doesn't believe in a no-win scenario, there's always an option. There's always a different way of doing something. It might be unconventional, but you always have a choice in that regards.
Yeah, and that ties into the free will topic we had before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's always a choice.
There's always a choice.
Yes, indeed.
So we'll wrap up in a minute here, but I got one final question for you, and it's kind of off our topic a little bit, because on the show, Science versus Conspiracy over coffee, we talk a lot about coffee, and I'm drinking some coffee right now. If you could sit down and have a coffee or a tea or whatever you drink with anybody in history, who would you sit down and have a coffee with?
That's a good question. At the moment, I'd probably say it would be interesting to get to know Jesus Christ as a human being.
Yeah.
And be able to sit down and talk and find out the way he actually interacts with you, and
mm-hmm.
what that would be like.
Yeah, that's a good one. How can our listeners get a hold of you? What are you up to? Plug away.
Yeah, so I have a podcast of my own,
mm-hmm.
which is also very open-minded, like you were mentioning yours is, and it's called The Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy. And I see it as an interdisciplinary endeavor, whereby, of course, the ideas from A Course in Miracles are part of it almost every time. Mm-hmm. But I've also have episodes without ideas from A Course in Miracles mentioned clearly in it. But usually I mention them openly, and people can comment on them and so on. So mm-hmm. So you can reach me through that.
Okay.
And through Facebook. I have a Facebook group with that name, and I have a channel on Telegram where I record the podcast live. Mm-hmm. So it's a live stream recording where people can join in and comment and ask questions. And so that's another option. So you can join that, and one can listen to the podcast. And yeah, those are the main ways to reach me.
Excellent. So I'll leave links in the show notes and in the YouTube description for all those that you just mentioned, so you don't have to keep writing it down or listen or go back and rewatch it. But yeah, I'll have everything in the show notes. But so yes, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a really eye-opener into miracles and creativity. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, that's the show for this week. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like the show but want to hear it ad-free, head over to Apple Podcasts and click on our premium podcast service, where you get ad-free content and early access to our episodes. So until next week, remember, being paranoid is smart. We'll see you next time. This has been a Story Monkey production.